Hi again, everyone. It is me, the Chipmunk, and today I thought I would talk about a pretty controversial subject within the pregnant community about belly patting, belly rubbing. Rubbing a pregnant woman's belly whom you don't really know, you just see in public. I'm going to get into that controversy and address it because basically it doesn't seem that anybody else really wants to go there. So, I guess I will. And that is what we will be doing today. Well, okay then, let's get right into it. Where do I begin? Well, first of all, the pregnant community. If you go around the forums and you look around, you will find that almost no one talks about rubbing a pregnant woman's belly. And when the subject is brought up, it's generally squashed. People don't want to talk about it because it's controversial. And here's why. Whenever you bring up the subject of rubbing a pregnant woman's belly, or patting it, or whatever you want to call it, the pregnant community tends to get a bad rap in general because we like pregnant women. And they're afraid that if they entertain these discussions about, patting a pregnant woman's belly, it'll just lead to this stereotype of pregnancy lovers being creepy and disgusting and, all these things, and that's why they don't want to get into it. There's also this ideal that pervades about it that it's just rude, isn't it? I mean, that's just rude. Well, there are certainly, if you don't go about it the right way, it certainly can be rude. And I think most of us, or at least people like me and others, don't really want to do anything rude, and we don't want to offend anyone. But, having said that, the pregnant community is just very leery about, pregnant belly rubbing. It's just too controversial for them. And so that's why when you go on the forums and around the internet, you'll see a lot of people try to discourage it at once because they think it's just, one more thing that people can use against us to portray us as creepy and, disgusting people. However, the act of rubbing a pregnant woman's belly is something that is done not just by people who find pregnant women attractive. It's done by ordinary people. We know this. We've heard it all. If you go around the internet and, type this subject in on Google and other places, you'll see that, pregnant belly rubbing is done by people who clearly, they're not all pregnancy lovers. They're just ordinary people who, for whatever reason, like to rub a pregnant woman's belly as well when they see one. And I think the reasons for that is even though these people are not pregnancy lovers, they have no attraction to a pregnant belly. There's just something about a pregnant woman's belly that cries out to be touched. I really do believe that because, it's not just us, it's everybody, a lot of people. So clearly there's something very special, as we know, about pregnant bellies and pregnant women in general. However, it doesn't come across that way to pregnant women. At least not all of them. Now, one thing you have to remember about when a woman is pregnant, and this is not an insult to pregnant women, this is just a fact, they are very hormonal. That's a scientific fact. And any man who has had a pregnant wife or a pregnant girlfriend can attest to the fact that when women get pregnant, they're temporarily insane. Because the hormones are going up and down and backwards and forwards and right and left and east and west, and they're just all over the place. They're crying one moment, they're happy the next, they're mad and infuriated at one moment, and then just gentle as a lamb. So that's all caused by the pregnancy. And so when things happen like someone wants to pat, her belly, oh, what a cute pregnant belly, isn't that nice? Some of them will tolerate it, but generally they hate it, and some will get just outright defensive about it. They'll be like a mad pit bulldog. So that's another reason that makes people leery of encouraging anyone to rub a pregnant woman's belly. One of many reasons. But let me start out saying this. One reason why people discourage it is because as men, and I'm talking specifically about us, pregnancy lovers who are men, are seen as aggressive. Our male species, it's seen as aggressive. Now that's not fair, and that's a stereotype, but that's just the truth. Even other men see men as aggressive. And any time a man would try to rub a pregnant woman's belly, it would be seen as some kind of guy trying to come on to a pregnant woman or something like that, or it would be interpreted the wrong way as being creepy and disgusting and, you're a freak for doing that. So, another reason why the pregnant community doesn't want to get involved or discuss pregnant belly rubbing. Because men are seen as aggressive. Now, that is like I said, that's a stereotype. That's not true about all men. But, and I think when it comes to pregnancy lovers like us, I think, you do have those that are bad, I'm sure. But I think the vast majority are mostly like us. They don't want to offend anyone, and they generally just want to pat a pregnant belly because it's so beautiful looking, and it's so gorgeous, and it's just, a very attractive thing. Another thing I've heard some people in the pregnant community say is that, well, you wouldn't want to rub a pregnant woman's belly. It's the equivalent of rubbing a woman's breasts. Now, that's a hard sell because that's a private part. And the belly is not a private part. It's not. I'm not going into a description of what your private parts are, but if I need to, then you probably need to have another discussion with your parents as to what is your private parts and what is not. Now, you could make the case it's like patting someone on the head or even, grabbing their butt, maybe, but even that is a hard sell, and here's why. You're not talking about grabbing a woman's breast. You're not talking about grabbing a woman's butt. You're talking about rubbing a pregnant belly. And if the woman was not pregnant, nobody would be thinking about rubbing her belly. That's what's different. She's pregnant. Now, of course, people will say, well, that's no excuse. Now, they're partially right and they're partially wrong. And I'll get into that in just a moment. But let me get back to pregnant women and how they feel about this subject. While there are some who have no problem with it, it's very clear from reading on the forums and everything in general that pregnant women, the vast majority of them, simply don't like having their bellies touched. Now that's understandable, obviously, it is a somewhat invasion of their personal space, and nobody would think of doing that when a woman isn't pregnant. There wouldn't be any reason to. But pregnancy, it's different. It's not like anything else, and it's not a black and white situation. And that's why I say it's not comparable to, like, say, grabbing a woman's butt or her breasts or anything like that, because that's sexual harassment. And pregnant bellies are what they are. They're, pregnant. And that's not the same at all as those other things. Now, we've seen how pregnant women feel about this, and we know how the pregnant community feels about it. But even so, a lot of people, even people who are not pregnancy lovers, tend to touch pregnant bellies anyway, much to the annoyance of a lot of pregnant women. So, after, digesting all this information, you might conclude, well, the whole thing's a minefield. We might as well just not bother. Well, no, I wouldn't say that, and here's why. I myself have patted many pregnant bellies in my lifetime, and I've only had one bad experience. And so, it can be a very wonderful experience just simply patting a pregnant woman's belly. It's just wonderful. I mean, it's just almost a magical and, dare I say, spiritual experience. I'm not, kidding with you. I mean, really, it is. And anyone who has, patted a pregnant woman's belly can attest to that, I think. So let me use myself and my own personal experiences, which are true. They happen to me. And let me tell you about, how I approach this subject. A long time ago, before I knew anybody other than myself liked pregnant women, obviously the best thing in the world would be to touch a pregnant belly. I didn't have the courage to, of course, because I was very young. But at one point in the mid-90s, I don't think I was quite in my teens yet, 12 maybe or 13, maybe in my early teens. I touched a pregnant belly for the first time. Not bare belly. I was at one of these parent group things where they have the kids out in the park. They take them on, school trips. Yeah. On the school trips, and, they got moms there and the kids there. And there was a pregnant woman there with her kids. And I got to talking with her kids and playing around with them. And as they were leaving, before they got in the van and everything, she thanked me for playing with the little kids and keeping them occupied. And I decided, this woman was extremely pregnant from what I can remember. I just remember her being so pregnant. She was like, due pretty much any day. And I decided I'm going to pat her belly before I leave. And sure enough, I did. It was the first time I ever did that. It was very quick. I just said goodbye to her, and I said goodbye to the baby by, gently patting her on the belly. And she laughed, and, it was just, a fun little experience. And I tell you, that made not only my day, but it made my days, for quite many months afterwards. Because, as you can imagine, being that young and never having that experience before was very special at that time. Now, it was a long time until I touched a pregnant belly ever again, because the opportunity did not present itself, and I got older, and as you get older, it's one thing for a kid to do it, but then when you're an older person, when you're late teens and then in your 20s, you're more guarded because while you have not changed inside, you're still the same person you always were. As a man, people view men as aggressive and, predatory and all these things. So you have to be careful how people perceive you. Well, the next opportunity did not present itself until I started working at a grocery store. This grocery store which I don't work there anymore, but I worked there several times. I have never seen a magnet for all kinds of pregnant bellies, not just pregnant bellies, but even bare bellies. I mean, you name it, they had it. I couldn't believe how many pregnant women came into this store. Now, it didn't happen every day, but it happened quite often. And it was one of the great experiences working there. I mean, even if the hours were bad and you hated being there, all the pregnant women made it worth it. Well, that and the paycheck, but the pregnant women were a bonus, I would say. And I got my first chance to rub a pregnant woman's belly. Not just any belly, a bare belly. The customer was just coming in, and I could see this woman. She was wearing, one of those shirts that didn't completely cover her pregnant belly. It was exposed from, above the belly button, onwards a little bit. Very beautiful. I would say she was around my age at the time, which would have been mid-20s. Yeah, early to mid-20s. And I got the chance to do it. I was the guy who helped people sack their groceries, at the counter. That was my job. So, you talk to people, you wish them well and everything. And I remember I said, I saw this pregnant tummy, and I looked down, and I just said, "Oh, wow, look at that tummy." And I proceeded to rub it. And she said, "Yeah, And, it was wonderful. I, rubbed it for a few seconds. And it didn't take too long or anything like that. And, oh, that was such a beautiful experience. I love that. And, of course, I sacked her groceries up. She paid for them. She left. But that was my second experience and the best experience I had since the first time I had rubbed a pregnant woman's belly. So that has stayed with me for a long time, as you can imagine. Now, that wasn't the end of it, of course. There came afterwards many other pregnant women that I saw. My next encounter was with a pregnant girl that, she was unbelievably gorgeous. This happened to actually be a girl that one of my coworkers knew. He was in school with her, and he knew her, and he was telling me a little bit about her. Father wasn't in the picture and all that. Usual story. I went over there, and not only is she pregnant, like in her 8th month, I would say. Not only was she pregnant, she was wearing this black dress that I don't remember what the top looked like, but it was exposing her belly. And I don't mean just a little bit. It was like, really exposing it, at least towards the middle of her belly button, if not upwards. And, of course, no stretch marks. She, not a blemish on her beautiful tummy. It was just wonderful. So naturally, I had to take the opportunity to rub her belly before she left. And my way of doing that was to be, of course, very polite. And I'm going to get into this in a moment. And make casual conversation. And usually what I would just say, I would just do this. "Oh, what a cute little baby," being in the belly, of course, that's kind of a, funny thing to say. And then I would just pat her tummy, and she would laugh, and, she thought that was very sweet. And before she left, I did it again and wished them well. And as I packed up their groceries in their cart, and they went on. Now, I could tell you a lot of stories, and if any of you want to hear more of my experiences, I will tell them to you, because they are, I do have quite a few, especially from that grocery store. It was a gold mine of pregnant women and pregnant bare bellies. It was just unbelievable. I had the greatest experiences of my life to date at that grocery store. No kidding. But here's what I want to get to. The point I'm making is this. I had many good experiences petting pregnant women's bellies, and I only had one bad experience. And that's in pretty much, you can almost say, a lifetime of doing it, with some breaks here and there. Granted, I was in a kind of a position where, since I'm sacking their groceries, I'm supposed to be friendly and make casual conversation, so it does make it kind of easier to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that every experience is going to go great, but they all went great for me except for one. And I will get into that. But before I do, this is what I'm trying to tell you. I don't think that rubbing a pregnant woman's belly is rude or bad, and it's certainly not creepy. It depends on the situation, who you are as a person, and how the pregnant woman feels about it. Now, generally you want to ask permission before you do it, but in my situation and the way I've done it, I didn't technically ask, but I wasn't rude about it. I wasn't, just, grabbing their bellies, anything like that, or patting them without their permission. I would just, make, short conversation, and generally I would say, "Oh, what a cute baby," and then, pat them on the belly, because that's, kind of an icebreaker, because you make a little joke, and then, you just pat them on the belly, never for too long, and, you just go about your business. And that's the key, being polite, being nice, and not being rude about it, not just, going up and touching their bellies, or at least not without talking to them first. But I have to tell you about one of the greatest experiences I had, and yet I really broke all my rules for it. But this is an important story I need to tell you when it comes to this controversial subject of rubbing a pregnant woman's belly. One day at that same store, I had been working there for some time, but in all my life I had never seen a complete bare pregnant belly in person. Obviously on the internet, or in books and magazines, and on television on those rare occasions where you could see a bare belly, but never in person. And one day I was stocking milk, and I, just out of the corner of my eye, as I'm, stocking the milk on the shelves, I look up and I see a young pregnant woman, early 20s, had to be early 20s, dark blonde hair, if I remember correctly, some sort of light blue tank top, and, elastic pants, and a complete bare pregnant belly. This woman was extremely pregnant. I mean, she was all belly, and she had to have been in the last stages of her pregnancy, like in the 9-month or so. And naturally, when I first saw her, I could not believe what I was seeing. I had never seen a complete bare belly. Now, I had seen partially, uncovered pregnant bellies, but not the whole tummy. I mean, from back to front, it was uncovered. And it was just an awe-inspiring sight. But one of the ironic things about this encounter is that my heart started pumping very hard. It started pumping so bad that I had trouble catching my breath, because I had never seen anything like this, and I was suddenly getting, nervous and jittery, and I couldn't believe what was happening, because this was completely unexpected, and it was the greatest sighting of my life. And I was nervous because I realized that I would probably never get another opportunity like this to rub a complete pregnant bare belly. But there was a problem. I was stocking milk. Now, nobody's watching me do this, but I have to, finish up what I'm doing, and I have to find some way to go over there and talk to her, make some polite conversation and all that. Well, I didn't have time, because I had to finish what I was doing and then see what the bosses want me to do. And I thought, oh goodness, this, she may be gone from the store at any moment, and I will never get another chance like this. So I broke all my rules that I usually observe to the letter with regards to pregnant belly rubbing. Now, I don't recommend you do this, but this is what happened. After thinking about it very feverishly for what seemed like an eternity, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to walk up there, occasionally act like I'm inspecting something on the aisle, shove a few things around where she's at, and then I'll just walk right past her in the same vicinity, and I'll just pat her belly and say, hey, that's, a cute baby you have, which was the line I always used, to break the ice and all that. Now naturally this goes against what I usually do, and it's a little bit awkward, but I feel like in this case I've got to try it. So this is what I do. I, do my little thing on the shelf, pretending I'm doing something, and then I quickly turn around facing her, and like going towards her direction. At this moment, it's kind of awkward. She's looking down, looking at the groceries she has in her cart. She's obviously, doing something with the groceries. And I think, oh, good grief. I had gone back and forth a couple of times because this, she had been looking down at those groceries doing something. And I thought, my word, the opportunities are going to present itself. So, like on the second try, I go back and I say, well, I'm just going to do it this time, And she's slightly bent over, which makes it even more awkward. But I just, I'm kind of slowly just walking over there in her direction, not really looking at her, and then I just, kind of glance over and I say, hey, that's a cute little baby you've got there, and then I, take my hand and, pat her belly a little bit. Now, she doesn't see me because I'm, very inconspicuous, even though I, came up there and most people could see me, but she's looking down in her cart and she cannot see me. So she goes like, oh, but then, I'm talking to her and I'm saying, oh, this is just a cute baby you have there, and she says, oh, okay, she starts, giggling and laughing a little bit. She's not offended at all, she was just surprised in the first second, but afterwards, she wasn't at all. And I said, I'm sorry, if I bothered you, but I just can't help myself, when I see pregnant bellies, I have to pat them at least once, And she says, oh, that's very funny. She's laughing and, not in a fake way. She was, just very chuckled by the whole experience. Well, I keep thinking that's about the best I can do, but then I realize she's going to the counter to check out a few minutes later. I'm done with what I have to do, stocking the milk and all. There was a problem, though. At this particular day, of all the days, they had these, like, softball, girls from a softball team. Yeah, they must have been a softball team. Coming in there to raise money for charity or some dumb thing like that. And they're, sacking the groceries, the normal job that I and the others would do. And so anyway, these girls from this softball team are doing that all day. And that means, of course, I can't sack the pregnant woman's groceries. I can't make the usual chit-chat and stuff that I usually can do. Well, I say to heck with it because, and I only did this because it was a complete bare pregnant belly. I was never going to see another one again, let alone pat one again. And I never have. So I decide, what, to heck with it, I'm just going to go up there and sack her groceries, So I don't shoo the girls out of the way that are sacking the groceries. I just kind of get in between the counter, where she is, and I just start sacking. I'm surprised nobody told me to get out of there or what am I doing, but I just start doing this and I start talking to her because obviously, she knows me, and I just ask her when the baby's due and all that, Oh, due, 2-3 weeks, she said. So she was in her 9th month. And she could hardly wait, and I said, well, that's great and everything. And before they leave, I just say, well, you take care of yourself. And, and I rub the belly this time instead of just patting it because I have to get at least a little bit more extra, in. Because I had never felt a complete bare pregnant belly before. I do that. I wish her luck. Finish sacking up her groceries. She's gone, and I try to take the longest look I can when she's leaving outside until she disappears. And it was one of the greatest moments in my life, and it was the riskiest because I did not observe the rules that I usually have for, when I do encounter pregnant women. But it worked out good, and I was polite. I was nice. It was just a little bit awkward, I would say. The whole experience. But other than that, it wasn't rude or unpleasant. It's kind of ironic. That was my best experience, my best encounter that I've ever had with a pregnant woman in real life. But it's also one that I have trouble remembering all the details because the whole time this is happening, my heart is pounding so hard and so fast that I'm literally almost out of breath. I'm almost suffering kind of a mini panic attack almost. And it really was hard to concentrate because I wanted to be polite and everything, and I was thinking about how do I do this without coming across as being a creepy idiot and all these kind of things. So ironically, the best experience that I had in my life also ends up being the experience that I don't remember quite as well because I was so nervous the whole time. And that's another thing that I found when you're around pregnant women. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm really nervous. And I really get, my heart really starts pumping away. Especially if I, think that I would like to try to, rub their belly or pat their belly or something like that. So the point I'm making is this. I don't want to deny anybody the experiences that I've had with pregnant women because I've had some great experiences with them. But I understand the controversy. And I think what all pregnancy lovers should do is this. If you decide you want to pat a pregnant woman's belly, you need to be respectful, you need to be polite. If you can, try to ask permission. But if that's too awkward, because let's face it, it can be awkward trying to ask someone if you can rub their belly. You can do what I do and try to find your own way to break the ice. Just make a little joke to try to lighten the mood, talk to them a little bit. And then before you leave or whatever, you just say, "Oh, that's a cute baby," or, "Oh, isn't that wonderful? When's the baby due?" And just, pat the belly a little bit. Not for very long, but just a little bit. Because really you don't want to do it for too long. Otherwise, it will look creepy. So that's the main thing. And I think if you observe those simple rules, most of the encounters you have with pregnant women will go off just fine because, as I said, they've all gone fine with me, and I've only had one bad experience. And all the rest that I've had in my life of doing this, they've all been good. It worked. Now, I remember when I told that story, that last one, about that pregnant woman, a long time ago, before anybody knew who I was on Cheviot's forum, and I told that story, and someone chimed in, in response, "I do not recommend doing this. Do not do this. This can be, very dangerous," or something to that effect. Now, I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember what exactly he said in his post, this guy, but he was acting like a real smartass, and, he was saying, "Well, I'm surprised, even though you got away with this, and she seemed very, fine with your charms. I wonder why you didn't get fired, because that's kind of invasion of personal space, and that could be grounds for termination in most places." Now, that took me back because obviously I had explained, or at least I thought I explained as best I could, that I had not invaded anyone's personal space. Yes, it was a little out of the ordinary of what I do. It was a little awkward, but I wasn't rude. I wasn't, creepy or anything like that. But nevertheless, the controversy about rubbing a pregnant woman's belly, when it comes to the pregnant community, they want to avoid it. And that's why when I told my little story many years back in 2006 on Cheviot's forum, this guy wanted to put me down and put me in my place and discourage it immediately. It was like, "I do not recommend doing this. This is dangerous and it must be stopped." So, yeah, he was being kind of an ass about it, but this is the typical reaction you get from a lot of people in the pregnant community when it comes to this subject. So I kind of brushed it off, but I also didn't post any more of my personal encounters with pregnant women because of that reaction. And I think a lot of people have done that because they're afraid of how people will react. So the point I'm getting at is this. I don't think it's wrong to rub a pregnant woman's belly. I don't think it's rude. I think it all has to do with how you go about it. And while that last story is kind of not the way to do it, because I did break some rules because, I was kind of desperate. I wanted to, pat this big pregnant bare belly that I knew I would never see another one again like that in person. And I haven't. Blasted. But I was right. So, the point I'm making is this. If you're going to do it, rub a pregnant woman's belly or pat her belly when you see a pregnant woman in public, you need to follow some rules and have sort of a guideline to go by. And it's like this. Rule number 1. Be respectful, be kind, talk to the pregnant woman at first and make some casual conversation. Try your best to ask permission if you can. If it's too awkward for you, then just make some conversation, a little joke to lighten things up, and then as you're leaving, or just before you're ready to leave, pat her belly and, wish her good luck, and then be on your way. Rule number 2. Always trust your instincts. If it looks like a pregnant woman is not in the best of moods, and let's face it, pregnant women can be a little bit hormonal, and especially towards the end of their pregnancies, they're not always feeling too good. And if they look like they're not feeling too great, don't bother. Just walk away. Trust your gut instincts. If your gut instincts are telling you, I really shouldn't do it, she doesn't look like she would appreciate, having her belly touched, then don't do it. Walk away. There will always be another opportunity somewhere at some point. Trust me, I've had a lot of them. So just learn when to walk away. And the last rule would be one that I think that should be very simple. If a pregnant woman is with her husband, boyfriend, man, whatever, forget it. Don't even think about it. Because that guy has no idea what your intentions are, and even if he knew your intentions were nothing but, I just want to pat her belly, he probably wouldn't like it, and he will probably hit you. Now that hasn't happened to me because I never even think about trying to pat a pregnant woman's belly if the woman's husband or boyfriend or whomever is around. So, if a man's around, forget it. Don't bother. So those are the basic rules. Now I could get more into the encounters that I've had with pregnant women, and if you guys want to hear about those, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to share them with you. I've got a fairly good bit. And but on the subject of petting a pregnant belly, I don't think it's wrong. I think it all depends on how you go about it. If you're impolite, rude, and just, casually coming along and touching a pregnant woman's belly without even saying anything, then yeah, you're being a rude jerk. So, don't put yourself first. Always consider the pregnant woman's feelings and how she might feel, and try to be as polite and respectful as you possibly can be. And I think that will go a long way in helping you. Now, obviously, what I've stated is that I don't think rubbing a pregnant woman's belly is wrong, and I don't think it should be discouraged. I just think that you should be polite, you should have rules that you should go by. Because I don't want to cheat anyone out of the great experiences that I've had, and I've had plenty of great ones. So, I don't think, in the end, that patting a pregnant woman's belly should be something that should be outlawed basically in the pregnant community. Like we should forbid it, and we should put it down. No. We should be reasonable, but we don't have to be fascists about it. Be kind, Be polite, be respectful, and don't be a jerk. And I think that will go a long way in helping. Now, it doesn't mean that all pregnant women will still like it. They may still, hate it anyway. And that's something you have to remember. You can be as polite and nice as you can be, and some pregnant women will not like you touching their bellies no matter what, no matter how pure your intentions are. And that's a risk you will have to take if you decide to pat a pregnant woman's belly in public that you don't know. So, in the end, it's up to you. But remember, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing all people like us who are pregnancy lovers. Think well before you act. Well, that's all for now, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.